Good afternoon, and I feel really bad that I will not be wishing you a good afternoon for another 5 weeks. Okay, thank you for coming. Now, after a stunning rebuke in the midterm elections that delivered a historic House majority, Leader McConnell faced a choice. In a newly divided government, he could have chosen to work with the Democrats to advance legislation where our interests aligned. No one expected him to pass a Democratic agenda, but Congress should be in the business of finding common ground. 7 months into this Congress, we all know that Leader McConnell, unfortunately, chose a different path. Leader McConnell has turned what used to be the world's greatest deliberative body into a legislative graveyard. The perfect complement to our get-nothing-done president. From health care to gun safety to climate change, Republicans just say no, despite the overwhelming consensus of the American people on these issues. Even on the least controversial, least partisan issues, Violence Against Women Act, election security, protected status for Venezuelan nationals, Leader McConnell's Senate has been a big black hole. There has not been a single bill open for amendment all year. Not one bill. In the minority, Leader McConnell complained bitterly about the same procedural tactics and said he'd run things differently. Let me tell you, Minority Leader McConnell would be aghast at how Majority Leader McConnell is running the Senate. Recently, there have been a few solitary bright spots. We passed a bipartisan agreement to raise domestic spending, $10 billion more than defense spending, and we permanently reauthorized the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. If not for outside pressure, I'm not even sure the Senate would have done either of those. The two things actually came the way they did because of Democratic effort and Democratic pressure. But those few accomplishments, sadly, were the exception, not the rule. After nearly 3 years of leadership under a Republican president, Senate Republicans' only significant legislative accomplishment is a hugely unpopular and unsuccessful tax bill that favored the very wealthy. In 3 years, Senate Republicans managed only to tie a 2-ton anchor when it comes to taxes around their necks in the form of a tax bill. An anchor Republicans up and down the ballot will be forced to wear through 2020. If you'll note, in the 2018 elections, not a single Republican that I can recall campaigned on the tax bill. It had become such poison. And that's their only legislative accomplishment. Now, looking forward, I believe Senator McConnell's legislative graveyard is simply unsustainable. The American people are fed up with inaction, while health care costs continue to rise. Drug costs do the same. Income inequality continues to deepen as the top 1% garner more and more of the wealth and the income in this country. Gun violence claims 40,000 Americans a year. Climate change wreaks greater devastation every season. And the entire national security and intelligence community warns about foreign interference in our upcoming presidential election. These problems aren't going to be solved these problems are not going to be solved by appropriations alone. Confirming more far-right judges won't make an ounce of improvement in the day-to-day lives of average Americans and probably make things worse for most of them. The pressure on Leader McConnell to bring legislation to the floor is growing greater every day. I'm not naive. I don't think Leader McConnell will change his behavior overnight, but I do want to make one prediction. I predict that the pressure will continue to mount on Republican senators, especially Leader McConnell, and they will be forced to join us in taking meaningful action on election security this fall. And on the issues where Republicans continue to stymie progress, Democrats are going to force the issue. In September, we'll be putting Republicans on the spot with 2 CRA votes. One, to protect Americans with pre-existing conditions from junk insurance plans, and another, to help middle-class homeowners who have been devastated by the administration's new rules on state and local tax deductions. Lastly, I want to say one thing about what happened in the Senate Judiciary Committee this morning. Instead of working with Democrats to solve the root causes of migration from Central America, Chairman Graham and Judiciary Committee Republicans are breaking their committee rules to jam through a partisan bill that would allow President Trump to keep children, young children, in cages for a longer period of time. We cannot and will not support this partisan process or this partisan bill. How fitting. Republicans end another work period by helping President Trump continue his un-American, inhumane, and highly unpopular immigration policies when it comes to kids at the border. Ready for your questions? Yes.
A couple of trade questions, if I can. The president, right before you came in, announced on Twitter he was going to reimpose tariffs on China. I wanted to get your thoughts on that. And secondly,
I haven't seen what he said, so I can't comment on that. In general, we have to be really tough on China. They've taken advantage of us. America has lost trillions of dollars and millions of jobs because China has not played fair. And being tough on China is the right way to be, but I haven't seen these tariffs.
related to that, what kind of work or progress do you expect to make over this recess period as it comes to the USMCA? Is there a deadline on getting any
Well,
sort of
there's
vote
not a
on that?
deadline, but the closer we get to the next election, the harder it is. Speaker Pelosi and I are united in that we believe, we talk about this a lot, so Speaker Pelosi and I are united and we believe that you need strong and enforceable labor protections in this bill, as well as environmental protections and some undoing of some of the things on prescription drugs. If that doesn't happen, there won't be a bill, plain and simple.
Back on the immigration question here, though. I mean, it was 6 years and change ago that you guys moved a bipartisan
Yeah.
bill through the Senate. I mean, here we are again, regardless of one's political disposition, what should be done on the approach on the border, the asylum issues. I know you disagree with the Graham bill, but this still isn't being tackled, and you're going to be back here probably in 6 months dealing with another border bill like they did
Well,
in
look,
June.
what we should do is just what you said. The answer to this is comprehensive immigration reform. It got broad bipartisan support. It dealt in a far more comprehensive way with all of the problems we speak of, whether it's border security, what to do with the people who are here, who are not here legally, how to change the existing rules on immigration so we could get more people we need in the job areas, both high-end PhDs and low-end farm workers, people who work in the stores. And that is the real answer. President Trump called me a few months ago. He said, what can we do on immigration? I said, Mr. President, if you looked at the actual language of comprehensive immigration reform, you might find it better than you thought. That's the answer. You know, we have learned over the last 5 years these little piecemeal approaches don't work. Yes.
Schumer, excuse me. So Republicans say on election security that the intelligence community is already doing many of the things that the bills already do. So is bringing up, you see, on some of these election security bills, a stunt, as they say?
Well, the bottom line is very simple. We want to do something on immigration, on election security. We want to do something on back on immigration. We want to do something, we do, but we want to do something on election security. If Leader McConnell would bring something to the floor and we can debate it, we wouldn't have to ask UCs. We're forcing his hand. And I think, as you've seen by his reaction, it's having some success because he knows stymieing it is not good for America and not good for the Republican Party and, frankly, not very good for him. And so we're going to keep pushing. And my prediction is our relentless pushing for immigration reform is going to produce results. There are some things that the intelligence agencies are doing. They would be the first to say there's more that needs to be done. And they've said it to me. And the states, 21, I think it is, state attorneys general say they don't have enough money to secure their election machinery from cyber attacks and interference. 9 states need paper ballots in case, God forbid, they mess up the election count. We need this, and let me just say, I have not heard one good reason from Republicans why they shouldn't do it. Is it, I hope not, that they think if Russia interferes it will benefit them? Is it, I hope not, that they're afraid of President Trump, who has this childish and puerile view that if he admits there was Russian interference, it makes his election illegitimate? Who knows, but there's no good reason why they shouldn't help us. Yes.
Fully understanding that you're on the same page with Speaker Pelosi on the impeachment issue, is there any point at all, any threshold at all in which you would believe that impeachment proceedings should start without Nancy Pelosi coming out and saying that it's time to do it?
Well, look, I talk to Speaker Pelosi 3, 4, 5 times a day. I was just at her office for a while. I think we have the same view. Let's get the facts. Let's get all the facts, and then we'll make decisions. Burgess.
A bunch of the Democratic presidential candidates have criticized the record of President Obama in these debates. Do you think that's appropriate, or do you think they should
Well, I'm not
focus
going to
elsewhere?
comment on what they said. I think President Obama is a very, very popular figure in America to this day because he did a very good job. Did he accomplish everything? No. You compare the Obama administration to this administration, it's night and day, and Americans are realizing that. Go ahead. Next.
Back to the impeachment question. Does the political calculus change, though, now that more than half of House Democrats are calling for an impeachment inquiry?
Well, look, every member, House and Senate, is going to do what he or she thinks is appropriate. I think, as I said, Speaker Pelosi is handling this appropriately.
On the immigration, understanding you kind of reject the piecemeal approach and that you
Yeah.
prefer comprehensive, I just want to clarify, because Lindsey Graham said today he'd like to see his asylum bill kind of become a part of the appropriations negotiations, that you would reject that being part of appropriations.
Look, I mean, I'm against Lindsey Graham's bill. I can't imagine the House accepting any appropriations process with that bill in it. Lindsey knows that, too.
Well, he said
Yes.
understand they have to give something.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's go comprehensive. Lindsey Graham, back in 2013, took a lot of political grief and showed a lot of courage in putting together it was the last, it's interesting, it was the last major bipartisan approach on immigration, and it was the most comprehensive and would have been the most successful. Let's go back to it. That's the answer. Yes.
You've expressed some concerns about Radcliffe for DNI.
About?
Radcliffe for DNI, saying that he's so partisan.
Could you
but
said
there-
Radcliffe, going back to my old days,
There's some.
which I never expressed concerns. It's a wonderful place.
There's some concerns also about that he padded his resume. Do you think that's disqualifying? Do you think the White
Look,
House should pull back this?
I don't know the details of the padding of the resume. When I saw this man at the hearing, I said, this reminds me of General Flynn when I first saw him on TV before a mass of people saying, lock her up. I said, something's wrong here. A 3-star general or a congressman, a leader of the Intelligence Committee, shouldn't be acting the way he did. He strikes me as extremely unqualified in every way. This is serious. This is about war and peace. If we don't have a DNI who speaks truth to power, who first is able to cull the facts and come up with an unbiased view of what they say, and in an unvarnished way can tell the president, we're in a much more dangerous world than they would have been. I could hardly think of a worse choice than him, padding resume or not. Yes.
Leader Schumer, you've painted a fairly bleak picture of the Senate right now.
I strike fairly.
A Senate that's potentially broken. Is that impacting, if you could put on your campaign hat for a minute, the ability
What
to...
hat is that?
Campaign hat, to attract candidates?
You know, we're all leaving here. I'm in a good mood.
We are too.
I know.
Is the climate here impacting your ability to attract candidates to run?
No, we have great candidates. I mean, if you look at the candidates we have, they are fabulous in state after state. They're not your traditional old-time politicians. The majority of our candidates are women. Many are veterans. Many have unique backgrounds, brought up on a farm, created a new business that was successful. We are excited about our candidates, and we're excited about 2020.
But it's no secret that there are 2 governors running for president that had been thought of as potential Senate candidates.
Let me tell you, I think the candidates we have are as good as any traditional politicians, probably better in this day and age. Yes.
Do you expect all 12 appropriations bills to pass in September, or will a CR be necessary?
Well, I hope a CR won't be necessary. Senator Leahy and Senator Shelby are trying to work things out along the 302Bs and the process, and we're hopeful we can. Neither side wants a CR. It's better than a sequestration, and thank God we got rid of that. But the Republicans have an impetus because of defense. We have an impetus because we feel so strongly that with these huge forces like automation and globalization and technology buffeting around the middle class, they need some help from a strong force. That's us, what we can do to help them. And I'm hopeful we can get this done. Yes.
Given the no poison pills agreement in the spending caps legislation, how do you think that Democrats and Republicans are going to work towards some of the more controversial issues in the spending bills, like border barrier spending, ICE detention bed capacity,
Well,
and reprogramming authority?
Some are poison pills and some are not, but hopefully we can work all these out. Okay? Last question, this gentleman in the back.
Do you support the drug price legislation that Senator Wyden and Senator Grassley have
Look,
been
here's what I
negotiating?
think. I think it's a good step, but it doesn't come close to going far enough. And we Democrats are going to have caucused. And we think unless we get a vote on negotiation of drug prices, which is far more sweeping than what was done there, despite Senator Wyden's very fine efforts, if we don't get a vote on sabotage, we're not going to let our Republican friends get away with, improving drug price issues very modestly along the edges and continue to sabotage the healthcare system, which raises drug prices and makes them less accessible. It would be wrong. So before these bills come to the floor, we're going to ask for votes on those amendments and maybe others. Thank you, everybody, and have a good break. Thank you very much. Should have got a good pitcher. That I would answer.